Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the GMologist Prevents. This is our ongoing series with my wife and roving reporter, Amy, where
Hello.
we talk about Westerns, and we're doing the top 10 Westerns according to IMDb of 2003, actually. And here in 2000, we're in just after the first quarter of 2004, and we're on number 9 of 10. So we have one more, and then we'll probably do one show for what do you call them? Not
Honorable mentions?
honorable mentions, right? And the last three, I think we're going to do. We decided to do the last three. We had BJ Boyd of the Arcane Alienist come in as a guest for Dances with Wolves, which was our last podcast slash YouTube video. And today we're going to have our friend and gaming colleague Vince Cardenas come on and talk with us about The Unforgiven. How are you doing this evening, Vince?
I'm doing great. I got to go see a good movie again, so it was great.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and we asked Vince to come on because he's an expert in film. All no, he. But
I dabble
what's
from
great?
time to time.
No, what's great is he watches a lot of these older films. He's kind of kept up on our ongoing podcast for the different westerns that we've been doing. We've talked about these westerns time and time again, the ones that we've covered, and from the Sergio Leone to Sierra Madre, etc. And we asked him, hey, which one do you want to come in and hang out and talk about? And he said The Unforgiven. So The Unforgiven, not to be confused with the 1960 film or yeah, or the
Yep, there.
2013 Japanese remake, because there is one. The
Yes.
Unforgiven that we're talking about is a 1992 Western produced and directed by Clint Eastwood. Yes, that same Clint Eastwood who was in the Sergio Leone films. You know Clint Eastwood, Dirty Harry, et al. And today it stars, well, like I said, it stars today. This one stars Eastwood as himself, not as himself, but as William Munny, who's an aging outlaw and killer. And he's like once more, getting the band back together, once more into the breach, whatever cliche you want, to take on one more job after he had turned to farming. So it did pretty well. It grossed over 159 million on a smallish budget of 14.4 million and did receive widespread critical acclaim. So specifically, when we get to the cast, we Clint Eastwood as William Munny, Gene Hackman, who you've seen in many, many things, as Sheriff Bill Daggett. They call him Little Bill Daggett. Morgan Freeman is in here as Ned Logan. Richard Harris makes an appearance as English Bob. And then we have James Woolvett as the Schofield kid. I don't, has he been in other things? Do you guys know? I don't know much about this guy.
He, he comes out as few, but I've only seen him as a young teenager or like a young kid. I haven't seen him much as an adult. Mind you, he still might be acting as an adult, but maybe he just looks different. Because I've had that before happen where, you see a kid when he looks younger, but when he looks older, they look different.
Yeah, yeah. He's a Canadian actor. I'm looking at, his
Hmm.
stuff. And it says they've been acting since 1986 to the present. So
Hmm.
Forgiven was in 92, but I'm trying to think if um I'm looking at TV and etc. Yeah, I don't know. He's in a lot of TV films, but
I
I
don't
don't
know.
see
Did
him
you
in,
look at Hallmark? There's a lot of Canadian stars in the Hallmark movies.
yeah, it seems to be like
That's
a
probably why
part
I've seen him.
like a character actor. He's
I
like
don't know.
he's in bit parts and episodes of different shows, but I really haven't seen him. Um, I guess he's the voice of Blackheart in the Marvel superheroes video game.
Hmm.
Yeah, so yeah, I don't see him as
But
a
yeah,
reoccurring. He's
he
a just a guest actor, character actor in a lot of shows. So I
he's
don't,
done a
yeah,
lot of TV.
yeah, a lot of TV stuff. So I think see what else. Saul Rubinek, we see him often. He's the W W Bocamp. He's the guy writing about. He plays W W Bocamp, who is like
Hmm.
the writer in the
Yeah,
show.
he is the
And you've
writer.
seen him. I know you've seen this guy a lot. Rubinek does a lot. Saul Rubinek. Um, Buster. He was in Buster Scruggs. He was in Nixon. He was on Wall Street. So yeah, he's in quite a few things. So yeah. So and then you've seen him often, and then I feel like Anna Thompson and Frances Fisher are people that you see time and time again. All right, Frances Fisher plays Strawberry Alice. Uh, she was in Watchmen actually. She was in Resurrection. She was in Jolene, Lincoln Lawyer, etc. You definitely have seen what she does. Her filmography is quite long. She was Ruth DeWitt Bukater in Titanic, which I've never seen.
You'll have to. We're gonna have to do movies
No, well, that Carl has never seen.
Carl's never seen.
Right.
That
But
take
she
up
is
way too
also,
much time.
yeah, she's also a character actor, but now and again, she will come out as a main actor or supporting actor in in things. And then the other Anna Thompson. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anna
Wait,
Thompson.
Delilah.
Unfortunately, yeah, she's Delilah. Unfortunately, she passed away of cancer in 2012, but she was in quite a few things. As you've seen her in things as well. So she was in The Crow, for example, and in Unforgiven. So has quite a large and extensive filmography as well. I don't think there's anyone else I can think of. Ron, go ahead. Yes.
I'll give a shout out to Anthony James. He plays Skinny, who is the billiard shop owner. He's also in High Plains Drifter with Clint Eastwood as well.
Oh, Anthony James, right, yeah.
Yes. As well as he did one of my favorites is In the Heat of the Night with Sidney Poitier.
Yeah.
Which is another good one as well.
Right. Cool.
Well, I like Sidney Poitier.
Yeah. It says that Ron White is in there. Is this Ron White? Ron White, it's not the comedian.
I think no. I believe it might be just another Ron White.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of side characters that help make this movie as well.
Right. But those are the main ones that we talked about. So it, like we said, it did win a lot of awards. We don't really only talk about the Academy Awards for movies here, but it did win a lot of British, etc. awards. But Amy, how did it do at the Academy Awards?
Well, it won 4 of them. Big surprise. 1993, it won Best Picture. It also won Best Actor in a Leading Role, Clint Eastwood. No,
it was nominated. He was nominated.
Nominated, sorry.
He won Best Director, though. Like Kevin Costner, he won Best Director.
But he can't win everything. And you're not mad at him for writing it and then starring in it.
No, I like Clint Eastwood, more or less.
He's a great storyteller.
Yeah. I mean,
but they did, Gene Hackman did win for Best Actor in Supporting Role.
Yeah, Best Supporting Actor, Gene Hackman did win.
And Clint Eastwood, as you said, got Best Director. They got nominated for Best Writing Screenplay, nominated for Best Cinematography. I think, well, we'll talk about that in a minute. Nominated for Best Art Direction, Best Sound, they were nominated, but they did win for Best Film Editing.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, so David Webb Peoples wrote the original screenplay and they were nominated but did not win. So that's pretty cool.
But you know what?
So it did pretty well. So much so.
Carl, since we're talking about Oscars, this is the 3rd Western to win the Best Picture Oscar.
Right.
The first one being Cimarron in 1931. The second one being the one we reviewed last time, Dances with Wolves from 1990, and this one in 1993.
Yeah, Cimarron, I don't know. I hear that it has not aged well. It's a pre-code epic Western starring Richard Dix and Irene Dunne, but it might be worth trying to find out. And
then we have to do 10 of the best, but now worst Westerns.
Yeah, but Cimarron, I guess, talks about the Oklahoma land rush of 1889. So I can guesstimate how it might not have aged well.
There's a few Westerns I know of that haven't quite aged well, but I mean, some of them are good watches, just a personal preference. But that's with any movie medium. Movies, unfortunately, don't always age well based on the build-up of time.
Right.
But some are always agreed on that they're iconic and need to be watched.
Sure. Well, I mean, I had heard that Stagecoach, for example, I think that's one of the ones we're going to look at, has not aged well, but it wasn't bad.
It did. I
Well,
mean,
the question is which Stagecoach? Because it's been remade a few times.
No, the Stagecoach with John Wayne in it.
Yes, but that one, I believe, that's already had, I think, 2 remakes already out after John Wayne's.
Yeah.
So
We're-
it's pretty iconic.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Cool. Yeah, so it did really well.
Mhm.
I think it's supposed to be it was listed as the fourth best American film in the Western genre.
and this one
Uh,
I don't have to
and
apologize for.
AFI's top 10, AFI's 10 top 10, but I don't know, the only one we've reviewed that was best and according to IMDb and people watching it, right, is High
Mhm.
Noon. There's also
Oh,
the
that was
Searchers.
so
Yeah,
good.
the Searchers and Shane were there too.
Oh, The Searchers.
Yeah,
I love that one.
so you did mention that Clint Eastwood did compose the main theme song, Claudia's theme,
Hmm.
Mhm.
and the music appeared in the theaters was composed by Randy Shams and Tim Stitham. So I thought it was really good. It's pretty evocative. It really worked. But this film, I feel like this film's pretty dark.
It is.
It's definitely really dark, and it's a different type of Western in that really like the main character is like the bad guy, really, right? So
Or
um
formed bad guy. Because
uh,
one thing I will say with Clint is he's always been gritty. So even if his movies when he was younger were grittier and a little different than like the iconic ones we know of, like with John Wayne.
yeah,
And then there was another one too, like with some Audie Murphy ones and whatnot, where it's a cliche formula.
right.
With Clint, they started changing the cookie cutter with it. Not to mention this one's darker. And one thing I liked is a lot of the older, when a Western actor is older, they tend to do more remorseful movies.
Hmm.
So like a good example is like The Shootist with John Wayne.
Yeah.
So that was like his last movie as well as his last Western. And it
Mhm.
talked about a former gunslinger in a different time.
Right.
This one was in the same way because it's in the late 1880s. So actually in the 1880s, which is at the end of the Western era, because the
Mhm.
Western era of the Wild West ended around the turn of the century of the 1900s.
Right. Yeah.
So I thought
Yeah,
it
well,
was a
we've
good
looked at films.
transition.
Yeah, we've looked at films like Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, which were like, not 1890s and early 1900s, early 20th century. And then, of course, like the first one we looked at, Treasure on the Sierra Madre, was in the, you know, in the 20s, 30s, right? And
Mhm.
Depression era. Yeah, but that is true. So we begin in Big Whiskey, Wyoming in 1881. And
I really did like the opening scene where he's trying to get on the horse to ride.
oh, that's not the opening. That's not the opening scene though, Amy. You
It
forgot
was
the whole.
part of it.
No,
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 that's later.
that's later,
We
Amy.
we start in Big Whiskey Town because it starts in the middle of the night
Yeah,
during not
Uh,
necessarily stormy weather, but it was like very dark
yeah. It
that
starts in
night.
It starts in the brothel. It's the whole focus of the.
It wasn't a brothel; it was a billiard shop that just
So,
doesn't have a billiard table.
that's what they all say. They were only going to the billiards hall for the balls and the sticks and the game. That's what they all
Well,
say.
I'm gonna say they talk about it later on in the movie, but we'll get to that.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
maybe.
No,
So,
I do appreciate in you saying that it was dark. I do appreciate the fact that they didn't try and clean the West up and make it look as though everybody was bathing and everybody had on white clothes and
yeah, it was definitely dirty and gritty, right? Even the feel
Mhm.
of it, right? The weather was always dark, rarely sunny, mostly overcast, right? So it does start there in a brothel, and a prostitute named Delilah is disfigured by a cowboy named Quick Mike, and then as punishment, Daggett orders Mike and his associates to give him some horses to actually not even to the prostitutes, but to Skinny Dubois, the pimp, Delilah's employer, for the loss of revenue. So the prostitutes are outraged, and then they put out this bounty, right, $1,000 for the death, and then we
Well,
switch,
well, there was one part too, because with Alice and whatnot, she demanded retribution.
right?
Little Bill, who is the sheriff, didn't want to give retribution because what
No,
she said. The only reason why they were able to get the horses is because Skinny pulled out the contract that he had for the girls that they employ. And then because of defaced property, not necessarily for what the act was done, but defaced of his property. In turn, he was able to get horses from them,
Right. So
and that led to the outrage.
yeah, it's not very pleasant. No.
Oh no.
But so anyway, then we get to, we get to the main character, Will Munny, and this guy comes over, this guy, Schofield Kid, who we kind of told you who he's played by, Jaimez Bollet's character. And he says, let's go after this bounty. Right. So then and now Munny is like a widower. He's repentant from his old killer ways, and he's raising 2 children. And another farm is failing. And I guess that's
Yes.
why he decides, because the farm's failing, his children's future is in jeopardy. He recruits his friend, Ned Logan, another outlaw played by Morgan Freeman. And they decide to help the Schofield Kid with his job. And that's when, like Amy said, they show him, he can't even get on a horse, he's so out of practice. And
Well,
uh,
one thing too, I like before that they showed him try to remember his shooting ways, and you
yeah,
see him out there trying to target practice with what we assume is blanks, just because nothing was hit
no, he couldn't hit anything actually. Yeah.
until he got the
His-
shotgun.
I thought it was humorous that he decided to go off and he just told his young son, keep an eye on the place.
Yeah. I know he left his kids there, like really like preteen kids, like adolescent kids there. And actually, probably
Yeah.
only his son was adolescent, and he said, if you run into trouble, go to,
Go next door, which
go to-
God knows that could have been miles away.
yeah. But I guess that was Ned Logan's ranch, right? So,
Mhm.
so it's kind of crazy. So, yeah, I guess different times, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
But
the other fun thing we learned is that the Schofield Kid is nearsighted and can't really shoot anything. So it's another
yeah.
funny thing we learned. And then one thing, it switches back to Big Whiskey, and someone has responded to this bounty, and this gunfighter English Bob, played by Richard Harris, arrives, and he was an old acquaintance and rival of Little Bill. And that's another really interesting thing that they kind of point out in this movie, is that a lot of these old outlaws, like Billy Money, they kind of put up their guns in a way and gone to do something different. And here, Little Bill, it seems like he was also an ex-outlaw, but now he's like the sheriff, so he's like the law in
Yeah.
town. And I don't know if
But-
he's, but it shows. I mean, I think this whole scene with the English Bob, shows he's still like ruthless.
Yes. One thing I will say, English Bob was working for the train. He was the protection asset. So he was like the bodyguard for the payroll, as well as the precious cargo on the trains. And
Yeah.
you see him just bad mouthing where he can, so he has an excuse to pull that trigger. Just like Little Bill can be too, as we see with English Bob.
All right, yeah, we introduce English Bob on the train, and he takes care of things there. But I guess the reason he gets, so basically English Bob gets beat up in town because Little Bill is enforcing the town's anti-gun laws, and he and his deputies seem pretty cruel and heavy-handed, and they beat English Bob savagely. And he's
But if he had
humiliated.
just turned his gun over,
One thing I will mention before we get to the beating, the deputy did mention to English Bob, saying, "Hey, there's signs going on here. You can't give any ordinance." And then he's like, "Well, I'm a peace-loving man. I don't have a firearm."
He kind of
And then
lied,
he lies about it, but the deputy doesn't enforce it himself. He then goes gets Wild Bill,
Mhm.
and then
Little
Wild Bill enforces with his own posse of deputies behind him,
Yeah,
already setting the mood of the town of how law is done.
right. Yeah, so and Beauchamp is there along with English Bob, kind of chronicling the English Bob's exploits, and he's seeing that Bob is humiliated. He stays to write Little Bill's chronicle next, I guess. And yeah,
Yeah.
so
One thing I did like to mention is that was notorious for the East, was to get these novels that were written
yeah, the dime
about these
novels.
old gunslingers, the dime novels. Most of the time, they were just founding anyone who was there, or not even always there, just people talking about folk songs or whatnot, and then they will write their exploits into fiction.
Right.
Hence the Duke of Death, which is the writer's exploitation of English Bob, and then Gene Hackman, of course, playing a great villain, because you can't have great heroes without great villains either.
Yeah.
And then he comes in talking about the Duck of Death, and then overshoot English by defacing him after in front of the biographer, as English Bob puts out, or the writer.
Yeah.
The writer's just infatuated with this romanticism idea of the West, which is a lot of people in the East that they did. And then from those exploits, he started inflating his own ego and talking about how he thinks the West is this and that. And of course, Little Bill's just going to hog heaven with it, just because of him being his storytelling now, saying that's all about him. And then the writer's just great with it.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, just looking at this makes me want to go track down the 2013 film that takes place in in Tokugawa, Japan. No, at the start of after the start of the Meiji period.
Speaking
So it looks
about
interesting.
books being written about the Westerns, I think it's fun that Gene Hackman has retired from acting and now he's a writer himself.
Is he writing Westerns?
He does. He has one that came out December 2nd, 2011 called Payback at Morning Peak. It's a novel of the American West.
Interesting.
And yeah, it's pretty high rated. I've read a couple of his, not on the West, but he's done quite a few on different histories, but I highly suggest them. It's called Payback at Morning Peak. It's really good.
No, but yeah, go ahead.
He did his first one in 1999 called Wake of the Peridot Star, I think. Peridot Star. But yeah,
I guess
I'll put the link in the
Amy is going to put the links. Yeah. Well, so I think you had said it earlier, Vince, but this Western is not your traditional Western, right? I think I forgot the term that you used. You didn't say non-traditional, but you used a different term for the kind of Western it was.
I would say more remorseful. Because throughout the exploits, because Schofield during their travels, the Schofield kid, or because he's actually one of Munny's gang members from when he was younger, nephew.
Oh wow! Yeah.
That's how we found out. That's how Schofield's introduced himself, because he grew up listening to his uncle Pete, as he points out, stories of Bill or William's Munny's exploits. Now, throughout the entire time, he's talking and asking questions about William, like he's getting to meet this real robust outlaw, and he has this idea in his head of how he is, and he's so cold, thirsty, and just like a folk hero, so to speak, the way his uncle told him his stories. And then he just sees him as a pig farmer.
Yep.
Blows everything out of proportion. And then as he's going down, in a way, he's happy because he gets to, find out the truth and then see all this hero, while on the same side, you see William just like looking at it, because he was a gunslinger. He was a drunkard. He had, as he points out, wickedness.
Yeah.
His wife, after I think, what was it, like 13 years or 11 years that they were married, reformed him, got him off whiskey, and saw the error of his ways. But now, after that, seeing all these exploits and all the evils he's done, and he's acting differently to the Schofield kid. Not to mention, like, you can see he's remembering like some of the stuff, because he doesn't remember all of his exploits just because he was a drunkard.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think what's curious too is like the Schofield kid is also, a blowhard. He's full of crap, right? So we learn later.
He's a cocky young kid.
He's a cocky young kid, and he's like full of crap, So it's pretty interesting in that regard. Like, no one is really a hero, and in a way, it's like it's almost like things are bungled and bumbled a lot, and that leads to tragedy, right? So so even first, when they get to the saloon, they don't see the sign, and they're not trying to be bad people necessarily, although they are there for the bounty.
When they went into town, it was raining sideways.
Yes.
B, you could barely see in front of the horse's head.
Hmm.
William is already coughing and already starting to get sick.
Yeah.
And then Ned and Schofield are trying to lead the way into it. So they're not even able to see the signs.
Right. Yeah,
And
money's
then,
sick and everything. But then like little Bill confronts him because he hear about these guys coming to town, confiscate Will's gun and then beats him, And
yeah.
then Ned
And
and the kid escape through the back window. And
yeah.
unfortunately, the prostitutes, I guess they're not bad people. They're in that situation because they're in their situation, just out
Mhm.
of uh, the desire to make some money and survive in the West. But they
Well, I
seem
mean,
to
if you
be
think about it, Carl, what other jobs could a woman have? A school teacher,
school
a
teacher.
prostitute, or a wife?
Yeah.
One thing I want to point out real quick is people always neglect this, but they've been studies on it. The West was settled by prostitutes because they
Mhm.
were able to bring in money to a town, build schools, build an orphanage, and build everything else.
Hmm.
So in a way, there are settlers, but it's just one thing that always gets. And I always find interesting is that they always get this connotation to them, but in actuality, if you think about it,
Well, that's
there's a reason why Utah had its first governor had the first woman governor out of all 50 states.
oh maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but the way they're shown in the movies, right? Well, and it's not like I said,
Yeah,
it's not a pleasant movie.
no, it's not.
Right, right, and
There's
then
no right or wrong in the movie. That's one thing I like. It's always these shades of gray, and you have
right.
to find your own morality
Yeah,
to it
even
all.
when they go after the bounty, because even like one of the guy Davey or one of the guys, yeah, it was one of the quick Mike. He's a guy who slashed Delilah, but Davey's
Yes.
very apologetic, and he really even tried to give Delilah. I felt
Well,
bad later because he tried to give Delilah herself a horse and not let Skinny get
well,
it
the
or
best
give.
of the run, not just that, but during when Wild Bill was slashing, if you saw Davies trying to pull him off, he
Yeah,
was trying
yeah,
to get him to stop.
yeah. So it's
Davy
really
was just
sad.
guilty
This
by association rather than the act.
right, right. Yeah, and then like and then I think he was thrown into it because Strawberry Alice said, "Well, you brought him here," type of thing, So it's like his fault, but he's trying to make
Mhm.
amends, and then it's really just pretty sad. I mean, how sad and how really awkward is not the word, but like I said, not it's not precise. It's not like the man with no name in Clint Eastwood's other movies where it's like one shot, one kill. It's just it's a I
Well,
guess
it's
for lack of a better term, it's a shit show. You know,
yeah.
they miss Davy, shoot his horse, he's caught under the horse, he's trying to get away, and then Ned can't do it. So it's just crazy. It's just a
Well, they have their second thoughts. In a way, it's in a
yeah,
way like Pill Rider. If you ever seen Pill Rider with
yeah,
Clint Eastwood,
hmm
he's a remorseful gunfighter who, in that one, is a priest
hmm
and changes his ways.
preacher, yeah,
In this one, it's the same idea. Ned is even who was looks like one of his longest friends, as well as one of his gang members as well. He became a farmer, and he even is like, I'm not that young anymore. Like I can't do this anymore. They've reformed and changed their ways. I believe it looks like he was a corn farmer as well as having a hobby farm for Ned. And
yeah,
then when Ned were out there to go for doing the job, because the only reason why Clint decided to do the job for money was because his farm has failed. He needs money to help restart his children's lives, and the farm just isn't going to cut it anymore.
yeah. They just need the money, right?
Yes. And that's why he talks to Ned about it. And then he's like, hey, I'm going to do one more. I need the money for this and that. It's not even about giving up their wicked ways. And then that's when Ned talks about uh, him going back to his old ways.
Yeah,
But Money is stating that he's still reformed because of his wife. And the only reason he's doing this is for money. So then Ned joins in to help out with William. And then the Schofield kid they go down. So then when moment comes to shove, Ned hesitates. He gets the horse down, pins him, but he can't do the killing shot. And then William tries to do it and is able, but then you also see guilt when Schofield mentions, like, hey, did we do it?
yeah,
And
yeah,
then all of a sudden you can tell that he's not thinking as a fanboy anymore. He's starting to realize these consequences.
yeah, yeah. As a side note, this is a bit of point of trivia. Sorry, Amy. But William Munny is also a fictional character in Preacher, the graphic novel, and it's a Saint of Killers. I thought that was I've seen I haven't read the
Mhm,
graphic novels, but I saw the show. But he's a Saint of Killers, and he's supposed to be inspired by William Munny here from The Unforgiven. So I
mhm.
think it's kind of interesting.
Here's
So
a weird question for you. Am I the only one that thought Clint Eastwood's character was going to end up with the scarred prostitute at the end? It didn't happen, but I really thought they were leading that way.
Well, nah, I don't think so. I just think that she took a shine to him just because of how pleasant he was.
yeah, he was actually nice to her, and no one's really nice to her, you know,
Hmm.
because
Everyone
she
treated her
nurses
as
him to health, and
disfigured.
yeah,
Hmm.
they go, "Oh, you're ugly now because you got
You
a
got a
scar
cut of
across
your
your
face.
face," which it really wasn't. But William Munny looked like he was all beat up and scarred too. So that's what he
Hmm.
said. Oh, like now, oh, you have a scar like me, type of thing.
Hmm.
So yeah, so Ned pieces out, or so we think. Well, he does
Well,
he does piece
th-
out.
he
He does
does.
peace out, and he's the character that I was most sad at the end of the movie about.
Yeah,
Well, Ned realizes that he can't do this anymore,
you can't
and
do
then that's
this.
why he leaves.
Yeah, he's
That's
like a
why
liability.
he gives money his rifle
Yeah,
and saying like, here, you can use this. I can't do this anymore.
right, right,
Because he realized once he choked and hesitated, and in their field, as a gunslinger, if you hesitate, it's over.
right.
So
He's a
because of that,
liability.
exactly, that's why he decides to leave the group and heads down south to try to rendezvous with them later on after they do
Mhm.
the last one, because the bounty was for both.
Right.
And at that point, yeah, they got one out of two down, and then they're now hunting on the second.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we learn later learn that Ned is captured because they do have a scene where he's talking to Little Bill and he's still pretty defiant. And in the meantime, so he tries to leave, but then he's captured. I'll get back to that in a second.
Yes.
And then Will takes the kid with them to the cowboy ranch, and they try to ambush these cowboys. And that also is just like so atypical in a Western. The way they
I,
killed
I
this,
like
the way they kill
I
this guy.
In
I
the
like to
outhouse?
point out one thing
Yeah.
before we get that far down is that this guy who is the one, this, mind you, Davy was the more remorseful one. This
Yeah.
is Wild. I think they no, not Wild. Was it Wild Bill? Trying to think. I always called him the Brute because that's the one that's cut Delilah's face.
Quick
He's
Mike.
in there playing cards. Oh, thank you. Um, he's the one playing cards. He's gloating about it that they're not going to get me because they now know that they're on his trail. He
Yeah.
even hires a gunman to protect him.
Right.
And that gunman has a bigger gut, I think the biggest gut on the actual screen, and is sleeping in the dead of night, who was supposed to be protecting him.
Right.
And he gloats that I have protection. They can't hit me. Yeah. But I always thought that was funny. And then uh that's when Money and then Schofield kid, them two are now just waiting for their time to hit him. They're just waiting outside the ranch until he comes out.
Mhm.
Um
I
and
think
then
it's
oh
funny that he. Oh, go ahead, Vince. I'm sorry.
go ahead. You're good. I was just filling in the gap that already said, like, you go ahead. You got something to say? Go ahead.
Oh
Save
no,
me out of this trouble.
I was just gonna say I thought it was funny that he said he was such a dead on shot, and he goes into he opens up the outhouse and then shoots him, but he didn't just shoot him once. He's like shooting and shooting and shooting.
Yep.
Well,
Yep.
not just that. This flags back to like the camping before they have to go into town to Big Whiskey,
Mhm.
where Schofield now thinks he's the leader of this group.
Right.
He is the one like, oh, I brought the job to them. I'm in charge here.
And he's
You
burning all
know,
their money through acts of kindness from the prostitutes too. Right. So
actually, he's not burning money through that. He's burning, if anything, his share
his
because
share, yeah.
as they say, there are advances on those payments.
Advances, right, right. Taking
But
advances. That's what I was thinking about.
yeah,
But he thinks
but
he's all tough, right? And then
yeah, he thinks he's all tough. He's talking. He has this a fake swagger that Ned and Money see straight through. And then he talks about he knows about Money's exploits because of his uncle, but then he looks at Ned, and Ned's like, like, what can you do, Ned? Like, how many men have you killed? I'm trying to see, like, I just want to know who I'm riding with. Like, I want to make sure that I'm not, you're not gonna choke, in other words.
Right.
And then that's when he starts bragging, like, oh, I've killed 5 men. Yeah, there was this one guy with a knife that came at me, and I killed him dead. And then now we flash forward to him. Normally we see normally in the typical westerns, we normally see the duel, or the bad guy trying to shoot him in the back, and then the hero normally sees him in the back and shoots him first, or the quicker of the draw. This one, we see him, Mike comes out mind you, in the morning now to go use the outhouse.
Right.
And then that's when Money tells him, like, hey kid, go. This is your time. Go do it. And then he sneaks up, opens up the outhouse, and then hesitates.
Right.
Doesn't know what to do. And then he's like, that's when Mike's like, please don't do it. Don't do it. Because he's in his vulnerable state. And then as Amy points out, he hesitates. And then he shoots him once in the chest, and then slowly starts doing the job done.
Yeah. And then he's remorseful, right? Like you said, it's a remorseful Western. He's remorseful about it. And he confesses drunkenly that he never killed anybody. The Schofield kid does. And then a prostitute arrives with a reward, but then he tells him about Ned, and then Will gets pretty bent out of shape and begins drinking and takes the kid's revolver. And the kid says, I'm out of here. I don't want to be a killer.
One thing I did like, though, is that when you see him there, at first he's playing it off. They're like, oh yeah, I killed this man. Yeah, like I shot him dead. Yeah, I did it. And then you see him break after, mind you, the bottle was already 3/4 full when they started that night. It's already about halfway. So he's gone through about maybe, a quarter of it. And then you start seeing tears start coming down his face as he's talking, like, oh yeah, I did it. I did it. And then you see him pause. And then he turns to Money and says, I lied. It's my first one.
Yeah.
And then you see Money just looking out in the distance, remorsing back to probably his first time and whatnot. He's like, drink up, kid. Just drink. Don't think about it. Just drink.
Yep. And then we do have the big shootout at the end, though.
Oh yeah. One thing I will say, I liked, because when they give him the bounty money, first tells him to the kid, like, here, count it. Help me count it. And then as soon as he says that and hands the money to him, Schofield backs up with his hands up, like, I don't want nothing to do with this anymore.
Yeah.
And then that's when he talks to Money talks to Schofield saying, hey, portion this out so Ned gets his share.
Right.
And then that's when one of the prostitutes then says, revealing to Money and Schofield about Ned's capture. So when Ned's captured, Cowboys found him, the ones that I believe were with Davy, or one of the ones on the ranch, found him in the South, brought him to Wild Bill, and then Wild Bill started interrogating him, and then started interrogating the prostitutes. I'm not sure if you want to develop more on that, or
no, he just interrogated Ned and killed him by flogging him to death.
And then that's when the prostitute explains that to Money. And I like how as soon as she starts going into it, and then Money asks this question, like, was Wild Bill did it? You see him just grab the whiskey straight from Schofield, and you see him drinking it in the middle of the scene as he's talking.
Right.
And earlier in the scene, when they were in the brothel the first time visiting, Ned is actually trying to force Money to drink because it's raining for the cold to help him out, and then tells him to warm up by drinking a shot. And you see Money push that shot away, and he's like, I haven't touched this stuff in years.
Right. He promised his wife not to, because that'd take him down to the devil or whatever, or bring out his wicked ways. His wicked ways, yeah.
And then you see him explain how Ned happened. You just see him just start chugging that bottle.
Yeah. Yeah. So then, then, like I said, then we have the shootout. The Little Bill wants to get all these bounty hunters. They display Ned's corpse outside of Skinny's saloon as a warning, and then Will just walks on there and kills Skinny.
And I will say, put a sign in front of Ned saying this is what assassins do.
Yeah.
When Ned never killed anybody.
Mm-hmm.
It was his
That
right.
was a sad thing, right? Amy had said that
Yes.
earlier, right, Amy?
Yeah.
He was guilty by association, just like how Davy was in the beginning of the film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty sad in that regard. But while Bill, it's little Bill,
Yes.
But
I was gonna say he's a victim of his consequences, you know.
yeah, as a victim
He
by
didn't stop it
association.
from happening, so he's guilty by association. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So then Will goes in there, and then he has a misfire, but then they have a gunfight, and Bill just kills like little Bill and 4 deputies. It's just
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah.
One thing I did like though, when they,
Because then I guess that shows that little Bill was full of crap too. He's just
oh
a
yeah,
bully.
well,
He's just a bully.
he is just a bully, and I liked how they started showing those cracks
Mm-hmm.
back when so this is when, after Inglesville already came to town,
Mm-hmm.
the writer uh is now staying with little Bill at his house that he's been building. So little Bill is putting in his head that he's reformed from his wicked ways
Yeah.
by being a carpenter.
And he's a
And
shitty carpenter.
Oh yes, even his deputies have said so.
Yeah.
That they, like, his houses are now built in an angle rather than a straight line,
Yeah.
and that he's a bad carpenter. Now he's not saying that he's a bad deputy or anything. He's just a bad carpenter. And then you see him in the writer during a rainy night, and you see leaks and pots and pans everywhere because there's leaks in there.
Yep.
And then little Bill explains more, I guess, stories of his youth to the writer. Polly,
Probably.
he himself performs liberties to
Yeah.
sell.
Mm-hmm.
And little Bill says, I hate assassins as well as people with low character. And then you see him inflating his own ego, and then as he's going through his rant, you see the writer just moving from spot to spot, trying to find a dry place to write because the water keeps going in.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, and then he looks to little Bill. Little Bill's like, I have no more pots. I don't know what else you want me to do for the water. And then the writer makes a joke and says, well, just hang the carpenter.
Yep.
And then you see little Bill's, like, his big expressions of his stories, his straight face and attitude completely changes.
Right.
Because
how
now,
dare you insult me, right?
Exactly. And then you start seeing the cracks of the facade.
Mm-hmm.
And Hackman's just great with those kind of characters.
Oh, I know,
he did that
great.
in The Quick and the Dead is another one that he does that. And then Absolute Power, which is another Clint Eastwood and Gene Hackman did a walkway. Work together.
Yeah, Gene Hackman in Superman and Superman Returns as Lex Luthor.
Yes.
Right. Yep. You see that he plays that kind of great sort of arrogant, flawed person. I think. Yeah, because I think Little Bill even said the irony too about that, as well as when Little Bill tells Beauchamp, "Oh, the best attribute for a gunslinger is to be cool-headed under fire, rather than have the quickest draw, and kill the best shooter." Right, and then Will just like Will Munny shows, oh no, quick draw is important, because he's like pop 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 pop, fires 4 times quickly
Mm-hmm.
from his revolver, and then the rest of the posse's intimidated away. Right, they all flee.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, after the first shotgun shell,
Mm-hmm.
and then you see half the people cower, and then with the misfire, everyone just drops to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But Will was still cool-headed, but the funny thing is even in Will's exploits that you hear Ned talk to Will about, is like, do you remember that? He's like,
nope.
No, I was drunk.
And he was drunk. He was probably drunk this time too, right?
He was. He went through the rest of the half a bottle of whiskey. And remember, that's Old West whiskey. That's rock gut and a higher proof than it is now. And then 2, he hasn't drank in 11 years.
He was probably drunk after the first sip.
Well, no. Those who have a tolerance and acquired taste to it, but probably within the quarter he was gone.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's crazy.
But
yeah, so it does end in a good shootout, I think. And then Will kind of mounts his horse and rides out of town. The writer says something and Will says, I was just lucky, Nothing
Yeah.
about that. It just you act on instinct. It's all this anything that anyone's ever told you is a lie. And you really act on instinct and you have to be a bit lucky. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's kind of what how Will I don't know if it's humility or luck or whatever, because he still is a fast shot, right? In any case. And he beats those guys.
He's a quick shot. He has a knack for firearms, but I will say, like you were saying, the writer does tell him, "Hey." So they always say, a gunslinger always shoots the best man first. If you actually see the best man that the first guy he shoots was Skinny, the actual owner of the bar,
Right.
of the billiard shop, I should say, who was unarmed.
Right.
He wasn't the best shot to hit. And then you see him getting unlucky because in the second shot, he goes right at Bill, it misfires.
Yeah. That's cool.
But then it just comes down to muscle memory and then some luck as well as some strategy. Because like when the pistols are drawn, while Bill stays straight and shoots straight ahead, while Will ducks down and shoots from down below, and is keeping either muscle memory or playing to his strength. Because he also uses when he leaves the bar. So while Little Bill is dead, as well as two other guys, the rest of the deputies left. You see him shout out the door, saying, "Hey, any man I see out there, I'll kill him.
Yep.
Any man who takes a shot at me, I'll kill him, his wife. I'll burn his house down, and I'll kill all his friends." And he uses that fear and that lie to get him out of the harm's way. Because there was a deputy that had his shot that could take out Money when he was trying to get on his horse. But the guy next to him was like, "Hey, but take the shot. But take the shot." Deputy's like, "No, you take the shot," because the fear got to him.
Yep.
And I've always thought that was a nice way to wrap it back up to not necessarily just being cool-headed or lucky. It's just fear, because the deputies all ganged up because Little Bill was there. Once you took out the bully,
took out the leader and the bully, right?
everything else just fell apart.
And the term I was looking for, I finally found it: revisionist Western.
Yes.
So rather than it's primarily concerned with deconstructing that sort of black and white vision of the American West, right? So, and really, it's a bunch of these guys aren't heroes. They're not avenging a God-fearing innocent. They're hired bounty hunters, right? From a bunch of from a group of prostitutes.
Well, this is also coming
they're
from
fearless
an era,
killers, right?
Yeah.
The 90s, a little different.
Well, not just that, but they were also, because with the 80s, they had like Bonanza. They had Gunsmoke. They had, the hero, the sheriff always wins in the end. And it's always this romanticized idea of the Western.
Yeah.
Because of that, everyone thought, "Oh, it's like this." And then the 90s hit, and then that's when the revisionist history does, and showing the marks and the scars of actual Western. There is a law, but the law is not always right. There's all these shades of gray, and then morality is what you make out of it. Like Money had no lies about himself, about what he was in his past. Because that's one thing I liked too, was when so Bill gets shot, but he's not dead initially. He pretends to be dead, and he talks about being a great gunslinger with his draw and whatnot, and he's pretending to be dead so he can sneak up on Money behind him. But then Money, after grabbing Ned's rifle, gets him, and then Little Bill comes up to him and says, "Before you shoot me, I'll see you in hell, Money." And then you see Money not even say anything, like pretty much like agreeing with him that he ain't gonna see anybody else.
Yeah.
And he has visions of his future, so to speak. When he had, during his fever, he said he saw the angel of death, and then B, people that he's killed in the past with worms on their faces, and like he saw the trauma and he saw where he was heading, and he has no qualms of where he's going to end up at, but he's going to try to help out as much as he can while he's still there.
Sure.
Especially for his kids, which is why he did this in the first place.
Yeah. So Amy, what game would you run to play this scenario?
Well, first of all, I would give this movie a 9 out of 10.
Okay.
It's close to the top. It cannot kick out the first two.
Hmm.
Not yet.
The first
And
two.
quite frankly, spoiler alert, this is my third favorite out of all the 10.
Oh,
And
Sierra
this
Madre
might,
and High Noon.
yeah. So this might shock you, Carl, but I think Delta Green would be a good one to do with it.
Oh, the Western Delta Green. Okay.
Or Deadlands, or even maybe even the system we're using for like Coriolis.
Oh, like a harsh system, like Walking Dead, right? The Free League system.
Something like that. I think like Twilight 2000 is not quite what I would use.
Hmm.
That I feel is a little bit more, I don't know,
Forgiving.
somewhat.
Yeah, because the Mutant Year Zero engine, like Walking Dead and Coriolis, is right because of the
You're either alive or you're dead.
yep.
And that's
And you'll
kind of
get
the way the West was.
yeah.
And I feel that way with Delta Green too. There's some investigation that goes on both sides, but pretty much you're either alive or you're dead.
Yeah, it's very quick. You're very quick to die in those games. And
Mhm.
I think a gritty game would really capture the feel of sort of the Unforgiven. Right. So what about you, Vince?
See, so I've played a bit of games, as you guys know, but I don't always have played on top. So I'm thinking this may be a weird take, but Alien. So like the Alien mechanic,
Yeah,
because
that's the
each one
same
has its
mechanic.
own.
That's great. Yeah, it's the same. Oh, you can add stress too. Yeah, Alien's the same
Because
mechanic as the free Mutant Year Zero Free League engine.
yeah,
So it's like
because
Walking Dead, Alien.
mhm,
You only succeed in the 6, but you could ramp
yeah,
up the stress. I like that. You could ramp up
you
the
can,
stress,
you
right?
can do the stress. I like the idea of each agenda where the morality, like you can't tell within the party
Mhm.
which is the right side or not, because it's all about what you see in it and what you take out of it.
Yeah.
And one thing I like, especially with Alien, is your actions have consequences. And with this one, it shows that especially here.
Yeah.
You know who you want to trust, but necessarily doesn't mean you should always trust them. For instance, Ned and Money were worried of Schofield Kid, not necessarily worried that they were going to do him wrong. They were just afraid that him being untrained and
Yeah.
full of his own self would actually maybe hurt them in the end.
Yes. Yes. Screw up somehow and get him killed. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So you like that, or even some of like I like the grittiness of Warhammer too to it, like with lingering wounds, the ideas of
Hmm.
consequences, and then the social, I guess the society mechanic within, because with the nobility and everything else has its own way of it, like how society plays, and maybe a fusion of them. But
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Well, like yeah, Call of Cthulhu is a D100 mechanic similar to Warhammer.
Mhm.
And then like Warhammer uses sort of like there's a what is it? It's the one Flags of Freedom. So that takes place in the Revolutionary War period. But it has all the rules for early weapons. Although I guess here in 1881 you already have you know uh double action revolvers and Winchesters. So it's close to modern
mhm,
sort of. So yeah, and I think there's there might be a good thing to use is to use like uh BRP, basic role playing, that you use for Call
yeah,
of Cthulhu, and they actually have like a Blood Gulch, yeah, Devil's Gulch, right? Which is they do have like a supplement for BRP where it's kind of Western but not
mhm,
Western and gritty, but not like no tentacles, no mythos stuff.
yeah.
So
That's the only thing that I thought about. Like I thought about like some of the weird West we've done in the past.
yeah,
But the only thing is the Elder Tours. It kind of takes away from that.
yeah, and I to me like Deadlands is a little too like can be over the top heroic, more
Yeah.
pulpy, right? So I would
Mhm.
right, Amy? You think?
I think so. I mean,
Especially
it
when
can
Amy
be.
plays and she rolls like 50 points of damage,
Not all the time.
on
Or
D4s.
drinks half the bar out.
Yeah.
Um, to my credit, I'm undead and I have to continue to be pickled.
Yep.
Yes.
So
But you
if they're gonna call us there to help their town, they just need to make sure I have a few extra kegs.
Mhm.
I don't
I
require much.
So interestingly,
a few
well, let's
extra
get back.
kegs, maybe half the bar.
Yeah. All right. Well, this David Webb Peoples has also some credit. He wrote the Oscar-nominated film The Day After Trinity, and he also co-wrote Blade Runner with Hampton Fancher. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
That makes
So,
sense.
and this,
Doesn't
you're right.
Blade
You're
Runner have its own RPG too?
yes.
It does.
Blade Runner uses kind of the Twilight 2000 system.
But it also makes a bit more of the scenery in terms of like the cinematography for it.
Yeah.
Because you see how dark Unforgiven is.
Yeah.
Blade Runner is known for how dark and the colors of it.
Mhm.
Because like within the candlelight here, you see even with like the blood and whatnot, it's always bright red and pungent to go counteract the contrast, the darkness of the other mute tones and whatnot to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, cool. Well, do you guys have any last thoughts or words? We'll close it up. That was pretty fun
No,
to
I'm
talk
just
about.
surprised that you didn't suggest GURPS.
Oh, well, GURPS.
Almost every other one you've suggested GURPS.
I do have a GURPS. I think I do have a GURPS Western product.
There
I
was
mean, you can do. I mean, for any of these universal systems like GURPS, there's GURPS Western, which is kind of cool and kind of grounded in reality, quick and the dead type of system. I would say
Mhm.
also Hero System. Um, my preference is like Hero System 5th edition revised, but you could lower the points in that system and make it very lethal as opposed to like a superhero game. And I actually
Mhm.
ran High Plains Heroes, which was a Hero System Western, which had elements of the weird. What I liked about it, it wasn't like we're playing Call of Cthulhu with Hero System. The way I ran it is like you can interpret based on your background, you can interpret however you want this weird stuff that you see. So like
Yeah.
so it's cool because like the indigenous person in the group, or the person with the indigenous the person, wait, the player character was playing an indigenous character, saw it as like, a battle between the spirits, right? Different spirits, right?
Mhm.
Malevolent spirits and positive spirits. And a Christian based character saw it as like the devil, fighting God versus the devil, angels versus demons. So I thought that was really fun to kind of do
Mhm.
that. And Hero System can be quite lethal. So I thought that was pretty cool. But anyway, but I would
What
definitely go for
about
like a greedy.
Carl, what about Joe's Reaver system?
I have not delved into Reaver. It's great for sword and sorcery, and we played around with with like 90s,
Mhm.
90s
The 80s,
plot
90s?
80s 90s drug cartels type stuff, narco type stuff. But like the 80s 90s seemed like not over the top, but really pulpy to me. So I don't know.
Mhm.
Yeah, I feel like a system more grounded in reality, and one where you like what you can if you're careless, you can be killed in one shot or really badly wounded in one shot.
Yeah.
Not
Mhm.
To
because
me,
not
those are
necessarily kill. I mean, like if you're playing a modern game and you get shot, like really, if we were to play, for example, Twilight 2000 as written, we could triage all the people that have gotten shot and hit with shrapnel and fragments, and you could probably save them, but
well,
we
Kasia
don't.
Unless
tries
you roll
to,
a crit.
We
Unless you roll a crit.
Yeah, unless you get a crit and it's
unless you
insta
don't
kill,
wear
but
your flak jacket.
right.
No,
All
but
right. Okay.
you
Well,
don't think Delta Green would be good? Anytime I've
mhm.
played Delta Green, that's an extremely deadly
Oh,
game.
it is deadly. You can get
And
killed
I
pretty quickly.
almost very rarely hear people say, "Oh, I played Delta Green and I lived."
Right, because in Delta Green, right, there's no like heavy armor that can ablate, gunshots for the most part, and it is like one shot, one kill for a lot of the weapons, right? So for a person, like because Delta Green gets into the mythos stuff, well, they're a little tougher, and you got to shoot them multiple times or unload
Mhm.
in a spate of rage with your Thompson or whatever, or your machine gun. So your assault rifle in Delta Green. Okay, cool. Well, thank you, Vince, so much. I hope you had fun
Oh
coming
yeah.
on and talking about The Unforgiven. Thank you, as always, Amy.
Of
Uh,
course.
and without anything further, I will say good night and good rolling.